The fluorescent lights of the Grand Horizon Conference Center flickered above the polished lobby floor, reflecting off the chrome lettering of National Business Leaders Summit. Marcus Avery, suit crisp, briefcase in hand, adjusted his tie, listening to the low murmur of arriving attendees. He was here to speak, not just attend, but to deliver the keynote on entrepreneurship in marginalized communities. A lifetime of effort had led to this moment. Then came the sharp bark of authority. "Excuse me, sir. Step over here." Marcus turned to see a uniformed officer, face set in a mask of suspicion, eyes scanning him as though his presence alone justified interrogation. He froze, confusion biting at the edges of his calm. "Sir?" the officer repeated, voice low but edged with menace. I'm attending the conference," Marcus said, showing his badge and registration. The officer's gaze narrowed. License and ID. The lobby, once a blur of professional chatter and coffee clinks, seemed to shrink. Heads turned, phones recorded. The polished floor reflected a tension Marcus could feel in his chest, tightening with each passing second. "Don't play smart with me," officer spat. "We know what you're up to." A whisper of disbelief ran through the crowd. Marcus's pulse hammered. He realized this wasn't a mistake. It was targeted. Humiliation and authority collided in a single moment, sharp as glass. As handcuffs clicked around his wrists, a stunned silence settled over the lobby. Marcus's mind raced. The conference badge around his neck flashed in the officer's line of sight. Yet nothing softened the gaze of prejudice. The doors of the conference center loomed behind him. He was about to be led outside, into the glare of public judgment, when the officer barked an order that would seal the unfolding catastrophe. And then Marcus noticed it. The cameras, the microphones, the whispers, and a single phrase, cold and deliberate, that would change everything. Marcus Avery adjusted the cuff of his crisp navy suit as he stepped into the lobby of the Grand Horizon Conference Center. The smell of fresh coffee mingled with the faint chemical scent of polished marble. Sunlight streamed through the glass doors, hitting the chrome lettering. National Business Leaders Summit. This was his moment. A keynote speaker slot he had earned through years of hard work, networking, and sleepless nights strategizing minority entrepreneurship programs. He had barely set his briefcase down when a voice cut through the morning murmur. "Excuse me, sir. Step over here." Marcus looked up. A uniformed officer stood near the revolving doors, posture rigid, eyes scanning him as if he carried a threat written across his skin. I'm attending the conference," Marcus said calmly, lifting his conference badge. The officer's jaw tightened. "License and ID." The words hung in the air, sharp and accusatory. The lobby seemed to shrink, phones tilted toward him, capturing every tense movement. Marcus's heart hammered, a mix of disbelief and simmering frustration. "Don't play smart with me," the officer snapped. "We know what you're up to." A ripple of whispers ran through the crowd. Marcus's assistant, Carla, approached, hands raised. "Officer, he's a keynote speaker. He has his registration right here." Blake, as the name tag would later confirm, ignored her, eyes locked on Marcus like steel on marble. The officer's hand hovered over his belt. Marcus swallowed, fists clenched inside his pockets. He could feel the judgment, the weight of assumption pressing down. Years of experience had taught him restraint. But this was public humiliation, a racially coded performance played for the benefit of onlookers. "You're under arrest," Blake said, voice flat. The word hit Marcus like a blade. Questions raced through his mind. How could this happen? His badge, his ID, his professional demeanor, none of it mattered. This was prejudice, raw and unfiltered, wrapped in the authority of law. The handcuffs clicked around his wrists, cold steel against warm skin. The whispers grew louder. Cameras recorded, capturing the unfolding spectacle. Marcus's pulse thundered in his ears. As he was guided toward a patrol car, the reflective floor catching the metallic glint of his cuffed hands, Marcus noticed the crowd's mixture of horror and fascination. The hum of security radios, the distant echo of the revolving doors, the soft murmurs of professional attendees, all formed a tense soundtrack to his humiliation. Blake barked an order, sharp as a whip, and the world seemed to narrow to the metal of the handcuffs, the officer's unwavering stare, and the dawning realization that this was more than a mistake. It was targeted, intentional, a public display of power. Marcus's eyes flicked toward the entrance. Cameras, microphones, witnesses, and then he caught a glimpse of a single badge gleaming on a nearby attendee. A hint of recognition, an unresolved twist that promised exposure. But not yet. He took a deep breath, bracing himself, every nerve alight with tension. The patrol car doors loomed, and Marcus stepped toward them, every step echoing a silent defiance. Somewhere inside, he knew this moment would define everything, not just his day, but the fight he had dedicated his life to. And yet, the officer's words before he spoke again cut sharper than the cuffs themselves. "You're going to learn your place." Marcus's jaw tightened. The doors of the patrol car waited, and so did the reckoning. Marcus Avery's wrists burned where the cold steel of the handcuffs bit into his skin. The lobby, once a bright, bustling space full of energy and ambition, had become a theater of humiliation. Attendees whispered in tight clusters, some filming with their phones, others frozen mid-step, unsure if they should intervene. The hum of security radios blended with the low murmur of gossip, forming a charged atmosphere that seemed to tighten around him with every step toward the patrol car. "Please," Marcus began, voice steady but urgent. "You're making a mistake. I'm registered for this conference. I'm the keynote speaker." Blake didn't meet his eyes. Instead, he shifted his weight, a subtle but deliberate assertion of dominance. "I don't care what badge you show me. You're coming with me. Move." Carla, Marcus's assistant, stepped closer, her hands raised, fingers trembling slightly. "Officer, this is a professional event. He's not a criminal. He's a speaker. The whole audience is waiting." Blake's eyes flicked toward her, sharp and dismissive. "Step back. You don't need to get involved." Marcus inhaled slowly, forcing himself to remain composed. Every instinct screamed at him to resist, to demand justice, to fight, but he knew that any sudden move could escalate this further. Instead, he allowed his calmness to become a shield, a subtle challenge to Blake's authority. "Do you understand the charges?" Blake asked, voice flat. "I haven't been charged with anything," Marcus replied evenly, though the sting of humiliation was gnawing at his chest. "You're making this personal." Blake smirked, a small, cruel twist of lips, and muttered, "I make no apology for law and order." The words echoed across the polished lobby. A few attendees murmured among themselves, disbelief mixed with quiet outrage. A man in a navy blazer whispered to his colleague, "Did that cop just arrest him in the lobby?" "Publicly?" "Yes," the colleague replied, eyes wide. "And nobody's stopping him." Marcus's mind raced. His schedule, meticulously planned for months, was unraveling in real time. Yet amid the chaos, he noticed the subtle dynamics around him. A janitor lingering near the elevators, eyes flicking nervously between Marcus and Blake. A young woman clutching her tablet, recording every move. A group of middle-aged executives frozen like statues, mouths slightly open. The lobby had become a stage for prejudice. The audience complicit in silence. "Step toward the car," Blake ordered, voice low but sharp. Marcus's head held high, he obeyed, each step measured. His shoulders squared against the humiliation, but he felt a prickling heat of anger crawling up his spine. "You know," Blake said, voice soft but menacing, "people like you, they think they can just walk into places where they don't belong." Marcus froze mid-step, letting the words land. The officer's tone carried decades of unspoken assumptions, centuries of systemic bias. He could feel the weight of history pressing down in that lobby. The way privilege allowed one man to assume dominance over another based solely on skin color. "You don't even know me," Marcus said, forcing calm into his voice. "I've worked my entire life for this." Blake laughed, a low, humorless sound. "Oh, I know enough." The handcuffs dug deeper into Marcus's wrists as they approached the patrol car. His suit, perfectly tailored that morning, was rumpled, the sleeves slightly bunched where the cuffs pinched. He felt exposed, like a specimen under a lens. The whispers and the faint hum of camera phones made him aware of every heartbeat, every shallow breath. This wasn't just an arrest. It was performance art, designed to humiliate and reinforce a power dynamic that had nothing to do with law. "Hey!" Carla called again, stepping closer despite Blake's glare. "This is ridiculous. He's a keynote speaker. You're making a scene. People are watching." Blake's hand snapped toward her shoulder, a warning. "Back off." I said, "Step back." Marcus saw the panic flicker across her face, but he didn't let it break him. He had faced microaggressions, coded biases, and dismissive glances before, but this was a spectacle in front of hundreds. He needed to remain composed, not just for himself, but for everyone watching and for the message it would eventually send. The patrol car waited, doors open like a trap. Marcus's pulse thrummed in his ears. Every step toward it felt like a battle between control and submission. The murmurs in the lobby grew louder, phones now lifting to capture the moment. He caught snippets of conversation. "They can't do that. Why is he handcuffed? Is this racism?" Each snippet felt like a shard of both hope and despair. The public gaze was on Blake as well. Marcus realized that exposure could be a weapon, if wielded correctly. "Last chance," Blake said, voice low, close enough that Marcus could feel in his chest. "Say one wrong word and it gets worse for you." Marcus met his gaze, steady, unflinching. "The only wrong here," he said softly but firmly, "is the assumption that my skin decides my worth." Blake's smirk faltered for the briefest moment. A flicker of tension passed over his face, but he quickly masked it with authority. "Enough talking," he snapped. As they reached the patrol car, a conference organizer finally appeared. Mr. Harrison, mid-40s, suit slightly wrinkled from rushing. "Officer, this is Marcus Avery. He's the keynote speaker. He's registered. This has to stop." Blake's jaw tightened. "I make the call here. Step back." Harrison's voice rose slightly, frustration mingling with incredulity. "We can verify everything. Please, don't do this in front of everyone." Marcus's mind raced. He knew that intervention might be too little, too late, but he didn't panic. Instead, he observed, cataloged, and considered how every move would ripple outward. Every phone camera, every whisper, every gesture would become evidence, not just of Blake's bias, but the systemic injustice that allowed it. As Marcus's hands were guided toward the car, he noticed a soft shuffle of people shifting, some stepping closer to help, others recoiling. The lobby was a microcosm of society, bystanders, potential allies, and complicit silence. Blake barked an order, sharp enough to echo off the marble. "Into the car. Now." Marcus's jaw tightened. He didn't resist physically, but inwardly, he prepared a strategy for the battle ahead. This moment, charged with humiliation, anger, and exposure, would not define him. He would turn it into a weapon, a platform, and a lesson. The doors of the patrol car loomed, and the world seemed to shrink to the metallic sheen of the cuffs, the oppressive authority of Blake, and the growing hum of an audience bearing witness. Marcus took one last, steadying breath. Somewhere, a phone recorded the entire exchange. Somewhere, the seeds of accountability were being planted. And as Blake's voice barked over murmurs, "You're going to learn your place," Marcus felt a quiet resolve take root. He would not disappear. He would not be silenced. Back inside the Grand Horizon Conference Center, chaos rippled like wildfire. The keynote podium sat empty, its polished surface gleaming under the harsh lights, microphones standing silently like sentinels. Attendees shuffled through the aisles, murmuring in disbelief, phones already lighting up with recordings from the lobby. The energy of anticipation had transformed into a tense fog of confusion, worry, and outrage. "Where's Marcus?" whispered a young attendee, glancing nervously at the front. "He was just escorted out," another replied, voice trembling, "by a police officer. In handcuffs." A low murmur spread across the room. Conference organizers, Harrison, his assistant, and a handful of staff scrambled behind the scenes. Harrison's face was pale, his tie crooked, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. "This is a disaster," muttered Harrison, pacing. "The keynote slot is in 10 minutes. The attendees are asking questions. Our sponsors." His voice trailed as he gestured helplessly. "Can someone call the police station? Get him released?" one organizer asked. Harrison ran a hand through his hair. I've tried. Blake won't answer anyone but the captain. And even then, he's not exactly reasonable. In a corner, Carla's phone buzzed incessantly. She tapped the screen furiously, voice tight with frustration. Marcus's lawyer, yes, he's on his way. Tell him what happened. We need something official, now. No excuses. Meanwhile, whispers morphed into low chatter that rippled through the audience. Some attendees shook their heads, incredulous. Others whispered with hushed urgency. Racism, public humiliation, this shouldn't be happening here. A mid-level executive approached Harrison. Are we seriously just going to let this happen in front of everyone? He's a keynote speaker. Harrison pinched the bridge of his nose. Believe me, I'm trying. But the officer, he's obstinate. And frankly, there's not much protocol for a situation like this. He's not just breaking etiquette, he's abusing authority. Back in the lobby, Marcus was seated on a hard metal bench, handcuffed, the hum of the fluorescent lights harsh against his eyes. Every sound, footsteps, whispers, radio static, press against him. His lawyer, a sharp-minded woman named Dana Caldwell, arrived moments later, brisk and commanding. Marcus Avery? She asked, flashing her ID. Ms. Caldwell, Marcus replied, nodding. Finally, Blake turned toward her, arms crossed. He's under my jurisdiction. No exceptions. Dana's gaze was sharp, unwavering. Officer, you are detaining a registered conference speaker without evidence of wrongdoing. This is harassment, and you are publicly humiliating him. Release him immediately, or face formal complaints and media scrutiny. Blake's jaw tightened. I make the calls here. You're welcome to try, but it won't change a thing. Marcus, listening to the back and forth, felt a familiar tug of frustration and restraint. He took a deep breath, voice calm but firm. Officer Blake, you are in the wrong. This isn't about law. It's about bias. And every second this continues, witnesses and recordings multiply. Blake's smirk faltered, but only slightly. He turned his attention back to his radio, barking instructions. Marcus felt the tension of authority, and yet somewhere beneath it, a glimmer of opportunity. Every whisper, every phone recording, every raised eyebrow was evidence. Meanwhile, inside the main hall, the conference continued to ripple with uncertainty. Harrison and the staff huddled near the podium. We need a contingency plan, Harrison said, voice low. If he doesn't arrive, we'll have to cancel or rearrange the schedule. Carla's voice cracked slightly as she interjected. Cancel? We can't cancel. Not with the audience, the sponsors, the media coverage. And Marcus isn't. He's not just a speaker. He's a highlight of the summit. The organizers tried to maintain calm, but the chatter of attendees was deafening. Phones lifted to record staff huddles, whispers, and speculation. Somewhere, a social media post was already going viral. Black keynote speaker publicly arrested at the National Business Leaders Summit. Details unclear. #racism, #business summit. Marcus's mind worked rapidly. He understood that public exposure could either humiliate him further or shift the power dynamic entirely. Every whisper outside the patrol car, every camera lens capturing Blake's actions, was a tool for accountability if wielded properly. Marcus, Dana said quietly, leaning close. We have leverage. People are watching. Every word, every move, every phone recording is evidence. You don't need to fight physically. You fight strategically. Do you understand? Marcus nodded. The burning heat in his chest from humiliation and anger was now channeling into cold focus. This was more than a moment of bias. It was a test, a stage, and he intended to control the narrative. In the main hall, Harrison and staff were strategizing. We can't just sit here. We need an official announcement. Something. Anything to calm the attendees before they start losing trust in this event, one assistant said. Harrison frowned. I'll take the microphone. But what do I say? How do you explain that our keynote speaker is detained by the police? Carla stepped forward. You say the truth, that he's being held without cause. That's it. People can handle the truth. And then you reassure them he'll be back. The murmurs grew louder. Attendees noticed Harrison pacing nervously, exchanging whispers with Carla. The tension in the room was palpable. Phones recorded every word, ready to broadcast the unfolding chaos. Meanwhile, outside, Blake continued to posture, unaware that the tides were slowly turning. His authority, once absolute in the moment, was being undermined by documentation, witnesses, and Marcus's calm defiance. Every step Marcus had taken, every measured word, had shifted the balance just slightly. Marcus's voice broke through the radio static again. "Officer, this isn't just about me. This is about systemic bias, about abuse of authority in public spaces. You're being recorded. You're accountable." Blake's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, hesitation crept in. He barked orders into the radio, then turned back to Marcus. Silence hung in the air, broken only by the faint hum of fluorescent lights and the distant murmur of the crowd inside. Somewhere behind the lobby doors, the audience continued to whisper, posting, sharing, watching. The world outside the small corridor was expanding the scope of this injustice far beyond Blake's control. Marcus felt it, the faint tremor of empowerment amid humiliation. Dana leaned closer. "We get him back inside. We make them answer. And Marcus, we expose the truth." Marcus's jaw set. He nodded once, slow and deliberate. "Then let's do it." And as the patrol car doors loomed like a gate to either further humiliation or strategic opportunity, Marcus Avery felt a quiet determination ignite. This was no longer just an arrest. It was the opening act of battle he was poised to win, not through fists, but through truth, witness, and resilience. The precinct smelled of stale coffee, industrial disinfectant, and a faint metallic tang of anxiety. Marcus Avery sat on a cold metal chair, wrists still stinging from the handcuffs that Blake had locked a few hours earlier. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered intermittently, casting shadows that seemed to stretch and twist across the beige walls. Outside the narrow, reinforced glass window, officers moved in practiced precision, unaware or uncaring of the injustice unfolding in this small room. Blake leaned against the edge of the table, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. His uniform crisp, his authority absolute in this space, or at least that's what he believed. Marcus met his gaze steadily, refusing to let the tension of the room dictate his composure. "You know why you're here?" Blake asked, voice low, measured, but loaded with accusation. "I do not," Marcus replied calmly. "Unless you're referring to prejudice disguised as protocol." Blake's smirk was faint but sharp. "Funny. You think your education, your money, your fancy conference badge makes you untouchable. It doesn't. Not here." Marcus shifted slightly in the chair, aware of the metal pressing against his wrists. "I'm untouchable in principle," he said evenly, "because the law, at least in theory, is meant to apply to everyone equally. That includes me, even to you." Blake's eyes flashed, a brief flicker of anger beneath the control veneer. "Don't get smart. You're lucky you're even here talking to me instead of spending the night in a cell." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I don't feel lucky. I feel targeted. And that's what this is, personal, biased, and public." Blake leaned forward, voice lowering almost to a growl. "Personal? Ha! You're a businessman who thinks you can walk into any room and demand respect. That's your mistake. And today, you're paying the price for it." Marcus inhaled slowly, steadying his pulse. He could feel the psychological weight pressing in, the cage of the interrogation room, the cold metal of the chair, the quiet hum of authority seeking to dominate him. But he refused to bend. "You're the one paying the price," he said quietly, letting the words land. "Every witness, every phone camera, every whisper in that lobby, they're documenting your bias. This isn't just about me. This is about you, your judgment, and your accountability." Blake's smirk faltered, though only for an instant. Then he straightened, voice sharp again. "You think you're clever, don't you? Try and play a game of moral superiority while you sit here in cuffs." Marcus leaned forward slightly, voice steady but intense. "I'm not playing a game. I'm surviving one. And surviving doesn't mean submission. It means recognizing the system for what it is and using every tool at my disposal to ensure justice, not just for me, but for everyone who might face someone like you." Blake slammed a fist onto the table, a sudden explosion of anger that made Marcus flinch. "You dare lecture me? After everything I've done, I'm not lecturing, Marcus said, voice calm, precise. I'm stating facts. You are abusing power. You are wrong. And the world outside this room is noticing. Blake's eyes flicked to the small observation window, where two officers glanced in briefly before returning to their work. He clenched his jaw, the fight between professional pride and growing awareness warring on his face. You think anyone outside this room will care? Blake snapped. You're one man, and this is my precinct. Marcus met him evenly. One man, one camera, one witness at a time can change the story. The lobby cameras, the whispers, the videos streaming live online, they don't lie. And the narrative doesn't end with your uniform. Blake shook his head, stepping back. You're delusional. Perhaps, Marcus admitted softly, but delusion doesn't strip away the truth. And the truth is, you made a mistake, Officer Blake. A public, visible, undeniable mistake. Blake's eyes darkened, and he crossed his arms again, a wall of authority. You know what your problem is? You're arrogant. You think that because you built businesses, raised capital, and spoken at conferences, that gives you immunity from basic law enforcement. Marcus leaned forward, hands still cuffed, voice quiet but cutting. It gives me immunity from arbitrary humiliation. And the dignity you think you can strip away? That cannot be taken. The tension in the room shifted. Blake's breathing was heavier now, his authority cracking under scrutiny, though he refused to show it fully. Marcus could see the faint tremor of doubt in the officer's posture, the micro flickers of hesitation that came from realizing he had been witnessed, recorded, and challenged. A phone buzzed on the edge of the table. Dana Caldwell, Marcus's lawyer. She spoke first, authoritative and commanding. Marcus Avery is being unlawfully detained. I am demanding his immediate release. Every word in this room is being documented. Officer Blake, you'll be held accountable for every violation of civil rights committed here. Do you understand me? Blake's jaw tightened. I will handle this. Dana's voice rose, steady and unwavering. No, you will not. You will release him immediately or face consequences. This is a negotiation. This is accountability. Marcus sat back slightly, letting Dana's words reinforce his own internal resolve. He had survived prejudice, microaggressions, and public humiliation before, but this time he had leveraged witnesses and legal authority on his side. Every second Blake refused to act correctly only compounded his own liability. See, Marcus said quietly, almost conversationally, looking Blake in the eye. Even the law itself knows you are wrong. Blake's hands trembled slightly, a barely perceptible reaction that Marcus noticed immediately. His psychological dominance had begun to shift. Marcus didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. Instead, he cataloged every moment, every word, every reaction. This was evidence, a blueprint for accountability, and a crucial step toward reclaiming control over a narrative stolen from him in front of hundreds of witnesses. Outside the room, muffled voices filtered to the walls, the hum of the precinct, the low murmur of officers carrying out unrelated duties. But within the interrogation room, time seemed suspended, every heartbeat amplified by the knowledge that Marcus's calm resistance was slowly dismantling Blake's assumed authority. Blake took a step back, muttering under his breath, "You think this is over? You think anyone will believe you?" Marcus smiled faintly, lips tight. "I know they will. And the ones who don't, they'll witness it unfold. They'll see. And the truth cannot be undone." The silence stretched. Blake's chest heaved slightly, his professional armor cracking, while Marcus remained composed, every muscle coiled with awareness and restraint. The room had become a battleground of wills, dialogue pitted against authority, observation against arrogance. Finally, Blake muttered, almost himself, This isn't how it's supposed to happen." Marcus's eyes met his steadily. "It only seems that way because you've been unchallenged. But the moment you assume immunity, that's when the system catches up. That's now." Dana Caldwell placed her hand briefly on Marcus's shoulder. "We'll get you out. Just keep calm." Marcus nodded, every nerve alert, aware that the public, the conference, and every recording outside the room were allies in this silent war. He knew the humiliation and anger of the past few hours would leave scars, but the fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. As Blake stepped back, muttering and muttering again, Marcus allowed himself the smallest spark of quiet triumph. He was still confined, but not powerless. Not in truth, not in principle, and not in the eyes of every observer who had witnessed, recorded, and would bear witness to what was happening inside these four walls. Marcus Avery sat in the corner of a small, dimly lit conference room in the precinct's visitor wing. Wrists free now, but a memory of the handcuffs burned against his skin. Dana Caldwell, his lawyer, leaned over the table, laptop open, phone pressed to her ear, orchestrating a web of calls, emails, and social media alerts. Every minute mattered. Every delay was an opportunity for Blake to manipulate the narrative. "You need to remain calm," Dana said, voice sharp, authoritative. "We have leverage, Marcus, but only if we control it strategically. Do you understand me?" "I understand," Marcus replied, though his stomach still churned. The adrenaline of the arrest, the public humiliation, and the audience of hundreds in the lobby replayed like a strobe behind his eyes. He pressed his fingers to the table, grounding himself. "I'm calm, but angry, and angry isn't the same as reckless." Dana nodded. "Good. Let's make them accountable. First, I'm contacting the precinct captain. Second, social media is already buzzing. Third, we need to notify the conference organizers officially. They can corroborate everything. Fourth, your PR team will draft a statement. Timing is critical." Marcus exhaled slowly, then leaned back. Do we risk escalating Blake? I mean, he's already been aggressive." Dana tapped her pen against the laptop. "He's aggressive, but now he's visible. The moment we stay silent, we let him define the narrative. You've been publicly humiliated, but we're about to flip the script. People are watching. He's accountable not just in law, but socially, professionally." Outside the room, footsteps echoed. The hum of precinct radios, the distant clatter of typing and phones, created a white noise backdrop that made every conversation inside feel amplified. Marcus glanced at the tiny window near the ceiling, where uniformed officers passed unaware, or perhaps indifferent, to the unfolding legal chess game. Dana spoke into the phone. "Yes, Captain. I'm telling you, arrested without cause. Publicly. A conference keynote speaker. Videos. Witnesses. Civil rights violation. You need to intervene." She paused, listening, then repeated, "I'm not negotiating. This is procedural abuse and bias. Immediate release is non-negotiable." Marcus watched her, fascinated by her precision. The calm, methodical dismantling of power was mesmerizing. "How do you know what to do in situations like this?" he asked quietly. Dana looked at him, eyes sharp. "Because I've seen it before. And I know that law isn't about assumptions. It's about proof, procedure, and exposure. Bias thrives in silence. Noise, controlled noise, is how we fight it." A knock at the door interrupted their strategy session. Harrison, the conference organizer, stepped in, face pale, suit rumpled, hands gripping a leather folder. "Marcus." "Thank God." "Dana, we've been following the footage. The lobby's full of attendees recording. Social media is erupting. Sponsors are calling. People are angry and they want answers." Marcus stood, smoothing his suit jacket. "Harrison, thank you for coming. The longer this continues, the worse it looks for him, for the precinct, and for the event." Harrison nodded, voice tight. "Exactly. That's why I'm here. We've drafted an official letter confirming your status as keynote speaker, your registration, and credentials. It's ready for release immediately." Dana's fingers flew across her keyboard. Emails sending in rapid succession. "We'll distribute this to news outlets, conference attendees, and social media channels simultaneously. Timing matters. We get them out and publicly validate you. The public narrative shifts instantly." Marcus nodded. "What about Blake?" Dana leaned back, her tone controlled. "Blake is a problem. But right now he's a symptom. Exposure will take care of him. Internal affairs will have reports, recordings, and witness statements. His arrogance becomes his downfall. Our job is to ensure the spotlight stays where it belongs. On his actions, not yours." Harrison interjected, exasperated. "But what if he refuses to release him? What if he doubles down? Dana met him with unwavering calm. Then we escalate legally. We have documentation, witnesses, and press. He can't hide behind his badge. This isn't conjecture. It's fact, and law recognizes fact. He can try, but exposure will follow. Marcus exhaled. He could feel the tension in the room starting to shift. For the first time since Blake's initial confrontation, he felt a measure of control. The humiliation of the lobby was transforming into strategy. An invisible hand of justice, methodical, procedural, inevitable, was beginning to guide events. A knock at the door again. This time, the precinct captain himself entered, expression grave, suit jacket stiff. "Mr. Avery, Ms. Caldwell, what's the situation?" Dana stood, precise and commanding. "Captain, your officer Blake detained Marcus Avery, keynote speaker at the National Business Leaders Summit, without evidence or cause. This was public, humiliating, and a violation of civil rights. We are requesting immediate release and a formal review of Blake's actions." The captain's brow furrowed. He gestured toward Marcus. "Sir, I apologize for the inconvenience and distress. I've reviewed preliminary footage, and we will correct this immediately." Marcus's pulse quickened. "Thank you, sir. It's not just inconvenience. It's systemic bias in action. It's visible, recorded, and witnessed. That matters." The captain nodded, making notes. "Understood. We'll resolve it promptly. Officer Blake will follow protocol for the review process." Outside, the hum of the precinct remained constant, yet Marcus felt the invisible gears shifting. The legal system, bureaucracy, and procedural safeguards, slow and methodical, were finally aligning in his favor. Dana leaned close, whispering, "Now, Marcus, we release you. Validate your credentials publicly, and let the world witness accountability in action. This is a turning point." Marcus felt the tension drain slightly, replaced with quiet resolve. He had survived public humiliation, targeted bias, and the threat of authority's unrestrained power. Now, with law, documentation, and exposure on his side, he was poised not just to reclaim dignity, but to challenge the very system that allowed Blake to assume immunity. Harrison stepped closer. "Marcus, once this goes public, the conference will support you fully. Sponsors, attendees, media, they're all waiting to hear your side. We need you to be ready to speak." Marcus nodded, tightening his suit jacket. "I will, but it's not just about me. It's about ensuring this doesn't happen to anyone else. The moment a person is silent in the face of prejudice, the system wins. I won't be silent." Dana smiled faintly, hands still poised over her laptop. "That's why you got me on your side. Every call, every email, every tweet, every press release, we control the narrative. Blake's actions are public, witnessed, recorded, accountable, and you turn this humiliation into strategy." Marcus exhaled. "Strategy, yes, but it's more than that. It's justice in motion. It's dignity restored, not as a favor, but as recognition of truth." The precinct's phones rang. Officers shuffled, and in the distance, Marcus could hear faint murmurs of the outside world, the lobby, the attendees, social media commentary. Every second, the story expanded beyond these walls, beyond Blake's control. Dana pressed one final key, sending a coordinated release. Done. Now we wait. We observe. We record. We hold accountable. You're free, Marcus. But the fight continues. Marcus's jaw tightened, eyes scanning the small room. "I understand. And the fight isn't just about me. It's about every silent witness, every person assumed guilty without cause, every systemic injustice hiding in plain sight. This is for all of them." Harrison looked between Marcus and Dana, his voice low but certain. "Then let's make sure the world sees it, and Blake learns he isn't above scrutiny." Marcus allowed himself a small nod, fists unclenching, shoulders relaxing slightly. The sting of hours past remained, but had transformed. Humiliation had become leverage. Anger had become focus. And the narrative, the public truth, was finally shifting. As he rose, standing straight despite the lingering tension in his muscles, Marcus realized the fight was far from over, but the tide had turned. Blake's arrogance, witnessed and recorded, had met the calculated, lawful, and morally resolute force of accountability. And in that small, dimly lit room, Marcus Avery allowed himself the faintest flicker of hope, the recognition that injustice could be confronted, strategy could prevail, and dignity could be reclaimed, one deliberate, principled step at a time. The main hall of the Grand Horizon Conference Center had transformed from a space of anticipation into a tense, charged arena. The podium gleamed under the bright lights, microphones standing like sentinels waiting for someone to claim authority. Attendees shifted in their seats, eyes flicking to lobby doors, whispering, phones out, recording every movement. Social media updates pinged relentlessly, tweets, posts, and live videos capturing Marcus Avery's arrest and confusion that followed. Harrison paced nervously behind the podium. His tie was loosened, sleeves rolled up, face pale from hours of managing a crisis. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice amplified by the microphone, "we have an urgent update regarding the keynote speaker. Marcus Avery has been temporarily detained, but we are working to ensure he joins us as soon as possible." A ripple of murmurs ran through the crowd. Phones tilted, people recording Harrison's words. The energy in the room was thick, expectant. From the back, Carla whispered urgently to Harrison, "We need to validate his credentials publicly. People are already speculating. Sponsors are asking questions." Harrison nodded, clearing his throat. "Yes, Marcus Avery is not just a participant. He is a confirmed keynote speaker, registered and accredited. Any confusion or disruption is due to procedural errors and will be resolved shortly. We appreciate your patience." Outside the main hall, Marcus sat with Dana Caldwell, watching the real-time chaos unfold through lobby cameras and live feeds. He exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in his chest settle slightly. "They're nervous," he said. "Good. It means the truth is rippling outward." Dana tapped her laptop. "It's more than nervous. Sponsors, attendees, and media are all noticing. Every second Blake delays, every word he utters, reinforces public scrutiny. The momentum is on our side." Marcus rubbed his wrists, remembering the sting of the handcuffs. "Do you think he realizes that?" Dana smiled faintly. "He will, and by the time he does, it'll be too late. Every public action of his has been documented, every statement noted. The conference is validating your position. Your narrative is now protected by facts, witnesses, and law." Back in the hall, whispers transformed into questions. "Why was he detained?" one attendee asked. "I heard it was a misunderstanding," another replied, voice low, doubt in every word. Harrison raised his hands, calling for silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, let me assure you, Marcus Avery will speak. We apologize for any disruption. His arrest was an error, and he will be joining us momentarily." The audience's reaction was mixed. Some nodded in understanding, some murmured in skepticism, and a few clapped quietly, supportive of the affirmation of Marcus's status. Carla leaned over to Marcus. "You need to prepare your remarks. They're watching. Sponsors, media, the public, they're all watching." Marcus nodded, adjusting his suit jacket. "I've prepared. But this is more than just a speech now. It's accountability. It's addressing systemic bias head-on." Dana placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "And you'll do it, calmly, strategically. Every word, every gesture counts. You've got the moral high ground. And now, thanks to real-time exposure, you also have the social high ground." Meanwhile, Blake sat in the precinct, hands clenched, jaw tight, aware that the unfolding chaos was spiraling beyond his control. Videos of his actions circulated online. Lobby witnesses uploaded recordings, and conference organizers validated Marcus's credentials publicly. For the first time, the officer experienced a prickling of vulnerability. His authority questioned, his bias exposed. "Did you see this?" Blake muttered to a colleague, pointing at a phone screen showing a live tweet. "Black keynote speaker wrongfully detained at Grand Horizon Conference. Witnesses and media are recording. Hashtag racism, hashtag business summit." His colleague shrugged. "You can't stop it now. Public opinion's moving fast." Blake's jaw tightened. "Then we contain the damage. I don't want this blown further." Back in the conference center, Marcus stood as Dana guided him toward the lobby. Cameras tilted to capture every step, attendees murmuring, whispers thick with anticipation. The tension of the past hours clung to him, the sting of humiliation still present, but the control now shifted. The audience was watching, Blake was exposed, and the conference's validation of the position empowered him. Harrison stepped aside as Marcus approached the podium. "Sir, the floor is yours," he said, voice low but firm. Marcus took a deep breath, surveying the crowd. The hum of conversation faded as he approached the microphone. Cameras tilted, phones lifted, social media live streams capturing the moment. He could feel the weight of every witness, the lobby crowd, conference attendees, viewers online. Every eye was a statement of scrutiny. "Good morning," Marcus began, voice steady, resonant. "I was detained today in the lobby of this conference, in front of hundreds of witnesses. For what? Not for any criminal act, not for any wrongdoing, but because of assumptions made about me, my appearance, my skin, and nothing else." A hush fell over the audience. Phones tilted closer. Every recording, every live stream, captured his words. "Today's incident exposes a larger truth," Marcus continued, voice gaining strength. "Systemic bias, microaggressions, and the abuse of authority can happen anywhere, even in spaces that should represent professionalism, equity, and opportunity. But visibility matters. Witnesses matter. Accountability matters. And that is why I am here, to reclaim not just my voice, but to challenge the structures that allow prejudice to persist unchecked." Whispers of agreement spread through the crowd. Some attendees nodded, murmuring quietly to their neighbors. Sponsors watched closely, journalists furiously typing notes. Every second reinforced Marcus's credibility and moral authority. Harrison watched from the side, his face tight with relief. Carla's fingers hovered over her tablet, ready to share highlights, clips, and official statements. Dana Caldwell stood near the back, arms crossed, observing Marcus's measured delivery, ready to intervene if necessary. Marcus continued, "I am not here to punish anyone personally. I am here to expose the system, to show that abuse of power, whether public or private, cannot go unchallenged. That is why transparency, witnesses, and accountability are crucial. Today, you've seen what prejudice looks like. Tomorrow, we change the system together." A ripple of applause began softly, then swelled as attendees rose, clapping in support. Cameras tilted, capturing the moment, recording, broadcasting, validating every word. Marcus's calm authority and measured delivery had turned humiliation into empowerment. Somewhere in the crowd, the lobby videos flashed across phones, sharing side-by-side images of Marcus's arrest and his speech. Public opinion began to shift, not through anger alone, but through deliberate exposure, truth, and witness. Blake, watching from a distance via live feeds, felt the sting of exposure. His authority had been challenged, publicly documented, and validated against the law and moral reasoning. For the first time, the consequences of bias, arrogance, and unchecked authority were clear. Marcus concluded, voice firm, resonant, and unwavering, "This isn't just my story. It's every story of injustice that goes unseen. And today, every witness, every recording, every observer has the power to prevent it from happening again. That is a responsibility we all share, and the change we must pursue." The applause was sustained, heartfelt, and real. Phones recorded every frame. Social media notifications pinged incessantly. The conference organizers, sponsors, and attendees understood that they had witnessed not just a speech, but an act of resilience, accountability, and moral authority. Marcus stepped back from the microphone, shoulders straight, jaw set. The humiliation of the lobby, the weight of the handcuffs, and the sting of public prejudice were still there, but transformed. Now, they were evidence, leverage, and proof that even in the face of systemic bias, dignity, truth, and accountability could prevail. Dana Caldwell approached quietly. "You handled that perfectly. Every word, every gesture. They saw the truth." Marcus exhaled slowly, letting the moment settle. "Yes, but this is only the beginning. We've exposed the system. Now we have to ensure change follows." Harrison smiled faintly, relief and admiration evident in his eyes. "Marcus, you've not just reclaimed your place. You reclaimed the narrative for everyone who watches and learns from this." And in that charged, luminous hall, Marcus Avery realized that public exposure, strategic action, and unwavering resolve had turned the tide. Humiliation had become empowerment. Injustice had been met with truth, and the audience, every witness, had become an ally in accountability. The precinct was tense, almost suffocating, as Marcus Avery's arrest became the center of an ever-expanding storm. Outside, social media feeds exploded with videos of the lobby confrontation and live reactions from the conference. Inside, Blake sat at his desk, jaw tight, eyes flicking nervously between multiple screens. Every feed, every post, every comment reminded him that his authority had been publicly questioned, and he had no way to control the narrative. "Captain, this is getting out of hand," Blake muttered to Superior, voice low but strained. "The public's seeing everything. They're framing me as a villain." The captain leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable. "Blake, you followed your instincts, but instincts don't trump protocol. You can't justify a public arrest without cause. The videos are evidence. There are witnesses. You know what comes next." Blake's fists clenched. He stopped. Words failed him. The realization hit. His career, his authority, and his reputation were unraveling. The images of Marcus, composed, calm, commanding the attention of hundreds, replayed in his mind, each one a silent indictment. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in the VIP lounge, phone in hand, monitoring social media trends. Hashtags like hashtag justice for Marcus, hashtag racism exposed, and hashtag business some accountability trended within hours. Each post, each share, amplified the humiliation of Blake and validated the evidence Marcus had been compiling. Dana Caldwell stood beside him, arms crossed, eyes scanning feeds with calculated precision. Every video, every comment, every witness corroborates your account. You've gone from victim to authority overnight. Public opinion is on your side. Marcus allowed himself a small nod. It's surreal. Every step of humiliation has turned into leverage. Every whisper of doubt, every shaky camera angle, every bystander's hesitation, it all feeds the truth. Dana smiled faintly. That's how exposure works. Humiliation becomes a weapon, not just for you, but for everyone watching. They see injustice in real time, and they demand accountability. Across the city, news outlets picked up the story. Anchor voices narrated clips of Marcus's arrest juxtaposed with footage of his speech at the conference. Tweets were read aloud, comments shared, and hashtags highlighted. The narrative was shifting. Blake was no longer just an officer executing authority. He was a symbol of bias exposed by witnesses, documentation, and legal advocacy. Back at the precinct, Blake scrolled through feeds, jaw tightening with every view. He saw himself on live streams, pointed out by commenters. Look at him. He thinks he can just act like that. One post read. Another, more damning. Privilege abused. Arresting a keynote speaker for no reason. This is why oversight exists. Blake slammed the tablet down, a reflex of frustration. I'm done explaining myself. No one listens. I have authority, but the world, they don't respect it anymore. The precinct phone rang repeatedly. Blake ignored it, but the messages kept piling. Internal affairs inquiries, complaints, and an urgent email from the police chief requesting a detailed report. Marcus's exposure had become unstoppable. Every documented instance of bias, every witness account, every camera feed created an airtight narrative that Blake could neither deny nor evade. Meanwhile, Marcus prepared for a live interview with a national news outlet. He adjusted his tie, shoulders squared, gaze steady. "This is more than my story," he said to Dana. "It's systemic, and it's public now. People are watching, evaluating, and forming their opinions. I can't waste this moment." Dana nodded. "Every word matters. Speak clearly, truthfully, and strategically. Focus on exposure, accountability, and systemic change. You've already won the moral ground. Now you solidify it." The reporter's camera light flicked on. "Mr. Avery, can you describe what happened in the lobby and how it escalated to your detention?" Marcus exhaled slowly, collecting his thoughts. "I arrived as the keynote speaker at the National Business Leaders Summit. Within minutes, I was confronted by Officer Blake, detained without cause, and publicly humiliated. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was bias in action. The arrest was entirely unnecessary, entirely preventable, and entirely public. There were witnesses. There were recordings. And the public saw it all. The reporter nodded, scribbling notes rapidly. And your reaction? How did you maintain composure? Marcus's eyes met the camera lens, unwavering. Composure is a tool. It's a defense against arbitrary authority. It's a way to reclaim agency when power is misused. But beyond that, it's about documenting truth, exposing bias, and holding those in power accountable. That is what I did, and that is what everyone witnessing the incident should expect in return. Dana watched closely as Marcus's words rippled beyond the lens, into living rooms, newsrooms, and social media feeds across the nation. Each word fortified the exposure, transforming personal humiliation into a narrative of accountability. Meanwhile, back at the precinct, Blake's phone buzzed again. Another clip had gone viral, this one showing the exact moment Marcus had been handcuffed. Captions read, "Keynote speaker detained for being black." Witnesses, videos, and public outrage follow. The humiliation cut deeper than physical discomfort ever could. Blake muttered under his breath, pacing. How do I fix this? How do I make them forget? The reality hit. He couldn't. Public exposure had turned against him. His authority, unchecked for so long, had finally been challenged, documented, and scrutinized by thousands, if not millions of viewers. Every tweet, every video, every eyewitness statement added to the weight of accountability. Marcus ended the live segment with a final pointed statement. Today, this incident exposed systemic bias, but tomorrow we demand change. Accountability isn't just personal, it's structural. Every officer, every authority figure, every organization must recognize that abuse of power cannot hide in silence. Witnesses matter. Exposure matters. Justice matters. Applause echoed from the conference hall, video cameras capturing every moment, while social media exploded in affirmation and support. Blake watched helplessly from his office, the sting of exposure more potent than any disciplinary measure could inflict. Harrison, watching the feeds in the conference center, exhaled in relief. He turned humiliation into authority. He's not just a keynote speaker anymore, he's a symbol. Carla leaned closer, eyes wide. And Blake? He's finished. The exposure is total. Marcus allowed himself a small, controlled smile. It's never personal. It's about truth, visibility, and accountability. That's the leverage. And the moment authority meets visibility, injustice begins to crumble. The tide had turned. Public opinion, media scrutiny, legal oversight, and social exposure created a web from which Blake could not escape. Every recorded action of bias became an unassailable fact. Every witness amplified the narrative. Marcus's strategic calm, paired with deliberate exposure, had transformed a moment of personal humiliation into a nationwide statement about systemic injustice. And as the conference continued, Marcus prepared to speak again, not merely as a keynote speaker, but as a living testament to resilience, strategy, and the power of exposure. Blake's arrogance, public and unchallenged for so long, had met a force it could not control. Truth in the light, witnessed by millions, undeniable and irreversible. The morning sun streamed through the large windows of the Grand Horizon Conference Center, cutting through the tension that had hung thick for hours. Marcus Avery walked into the main hall, shoulders squared, head held high. Every step echoed with a quiet authority born of resilience, strategy, and the moral high ground. He wasn't just a keynote speaker anymore. He was a symbol of accountability in a system that had tried to humiliate him. Harrison greeted him at the podium, eyes wide with relief. Marcus, you have no idea how much this matters. The audience, the sponsors, the media, they're all aligned now. They're on your side. Marcus nodded, scanning the room. Phones recorded his every movement. Live streams buzzed and journalists whispered into microphones, ready to capture every word. It's not just about being on my side, Marcus said softly, voice measured. It's about recognizing systemic bias, witnessing injustice, and ensuring accountability. This isn't a victory for me alone. It's a reminder for everyone watching. Dana Caldwell, standing quietly to the side, gave him a brief nod. You handled the exposure perfectly. Every step, every word, they can't argue with documented truth. Blake's arrogance has met reality. Meanwhile, at the precinct, Officer Blake sat in his supervisor's office, a formal complaint file heavy on the desk before him. His hands trembled slightly, a faint sheen of sweat visible on his forehead. Internal affairs investigators and the precinct captain had already reviewed video evidence, witness statements, and social media posts. The exposure was complete, undeniable. "You've crossed the line, Blake," the captain said, voice tight with controlled frustration. "Public humiliation, detaining a citizen without cause, violating civil rights. It's all documented. You can't undo this." Blake's jaw tightened. I was following protocol." "Protocol?" The captain's voice rose. "There was no probable cause. You acted on bias, and now the entire city and beyond knows it. Your authority doesn't give you immunity from accountability." Back at the conference, Marcus approached the podium as the audience quieted, eyes fixed on him. "This week has been more than just a conference," he began, voice steady and commanding. "It has been a lesson in responsibility, visibility, and the consequences of unchecked power. What happened to me, being detained, humiliated, was wrong, but it also revealed a truth. Authority, when abused, must meet accountability." The audience murmured in agreement. Journalists typed furiously. Sponsors exchanged notes, and social media feeds buzzed with live updates. Every eye in the room, and beyond through live streams, focused on Marcus's words. Harrison leaned over to Carla, whispering, "He's not just speaking, he's setting a precedent. People are going to remember this moment." Carla nodded, fingers hovering over her tablet, ready to post updates that would reach thousands instantly. And Blake, he can't hide anymore. Back at the precinct, Blake was formally reprimanded, his actions under official investigation. Media outlets had picked up the story, and public outcry intensified. Social media timelines were filled with clips of his misconduct and Marcus's calm, authoritative response. His colleagues whispered behind closed doors. Some were sympathetic, but many understood the gravity of the exposure. Blake muttered under his breath, fists clenched. "This isn't fair. I was only doing my job. You were abusing it." One officer said quietly, "And now the consequences are coming." Marcus returned to conference hall, eyes scanning the crowd. He continued, "The lesson here is clear. Bias, when unchallenged, perpetuates harm. Silence enables injustice. Exposure, accountability, and courage create change. We cannot let authority exist unchecked. Not in business, not in law enforcement, not in any sphere of society." Audience members clapped, some rising to their feet. Phones captured the moment, broadcasting the message globally. The hashtags trended even more fiercely, and Marcus's words reinforced the moral authority he had gained. Dana whispered, "This is a turning point. Everything else is follow-up." Marcus's gaze softened slightly. "It's not just about winning a personal battle. It's about changing perception, ensuring systemic oversight, and empowering witnesses to speak up. That's the real consequence Blake, and others like him, will face. The world is watching, and they will be accountable." Meanwhile, Harrison approached Marcus after the speech, voice low but urgent. "Marcus, sponsors are asking for a joint statement. They want to reaffirm the conference's commitment to equity and oversight. They also want to publicly denounce Blake's actions. We can make this a landmark moment." Marcus nodded slowly. "Yes, but carefully. It's not about revenge. It's about principles. Integrity must drive the narrative." Outside the conference center, reporters lined the streets, cameras aimed, microphones ready. Every video, every quote, every photograph captured the unfolding consequences of Blake's actions. He could no longer control the narrative. Exposure had created accountability, and accountability had real-world implications. Formal reprimands, public scrutiny, and a tarnished career. At the precinct, Blake received official notification of the internal affairs investigation. He stared at the letter, the weight of exposure settling heavily on his shoulders. The videos, the witness statements, Marcus's speech, and public outrage had converged to create an inescapable reality. His authority had limits, and violation of civil rights carried consequences. Marcus, meanwhile, concluded his keynote with a final statement that echoed through both the hall and live streams globally. Change does not happen by silencing those who are targeted. It happens when we confront injustice with truth, evidence, and moral courage. Today, we have witness accountability. Tomorrow, we continue the work. Applause erupted. Phones recorded every moment, and social media feeds buzzed with praise. Marcus had not only reclaimed his dignity, he had transformed humiliation into empowerment, exposure into action, and injustice into accountability. Carla whispered to Harrison, "Look at the numbers. Engagement is through the roof. People are sharing his message. Blake's actions are being dissected everywhere. The consequence is complete." Harrison exhaled, relief and admiration in his eyes. He's done more than speak. He's changed the narrative. He's ensured that accountability isn't optional. It's inevitable. Dana approached Marcus, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You've turned personal injustice into systemic awareness. That's a rare kind of power. And now, Blake faces what comes from exposing bias to the light: public scrutiny, professional consequences, and social accountability." Marcus nodded, voice quiet but resolute. "It's not enough to stop here, but it's a start. Consequences are not just for him. They're for the system that allowed this. Every authority figure watching today understands. Abuse of power has limits, and exposure is inevitable." At the precinct, Blake sat silently, reading news articles, watching viral clips, and reviewing witness statements. Each file, each video, each public comment reinforced reality. His actions had consequences. Humiliation was no longer just private. It was a global testimony of accountability. Marcus nodded, voice quiet but resolute. "It's not enough to stop here, but it's a start. Consequences are not just for him. They're for the system that allowed this. Every authority figure watching today understands. Abuse of power has limits, and exposure is inevitable." At the precinct, Blake sat silently, reading news articles, watching viral clips, and reviewing witness statements. Each file, each video, each public comment reinforced reality. His actions had consequences. Humiliation was no longer just private. It was a global testimony of accountability. Back at the conference, Marcus exited the podium, greeted by Harrison, Carla, and Dana. The air felt lighter, though the weight of the day lingered. Marcus exhaled, a measured smile on his face. "Justice isn't instantaneous," he said softly, "but exposure, strategy, and moral courage make consequences unavoidable." Dana nodded. "And today, you've shown the world how to confront abuse, bias, and systemic injustice with precision and dignity. Blake's downfall isn't vengeance, it's accountability. And that's powerful." Marcus took one last look at the audience, at the cameras, at the digital streams capturing every moment. Humiliation had been transformed into authority, exposure had created consequences, and resilience had turned into empowerment. The fight for justice was far from over, but today, accountability had been made clear. And in that charged, luminous hall, Marcus Avery understood the final truth. Consequences, when rooted in visibility, evidence, and moral courage, could never be avoided. Authority had limits, injustice had a witness, and the system, slow, flawed, but ultimately responsive, would hold the guilty accountable. The city's skyline shimmered under the late afternoon sun, but Marcus Avery's mind wasn't on the lights. He stood in the office of the National Business Leaders Summit, overlooking the bustling streets below, reflecting on how quickly humiliation had transformed into vindication. The viral videos, live feeds, witness statements, and legal advocacy had created a chain reaction that no amount of denial could reverse. Justice, slow but deliberate, was taking hold. Dana Caldwell leaned against the desk, laptop open, reviewing messages from reporters and conference organizers. "Marcus, the press conference today will solidify everything. Blake is facing internal disciplinary action. The social media narrative is entirely in your favor, and sponsors are sending statements of support. This is vindication in every sense." Marcus exhaled slowly, tracing the edge of the desk with his fingers. "Vindication is one thing, Dana. Recognition is another. Today it's public. But the challenge is ensuring this doesn't become just another story. We have to make it systemic, visible, and enduring." Dana nodded, We do that through formal channels, documentation, and continuous exposure, and by demonstrating how resilience, calm, and strategic action counter systemic bias. The office door opened, and Harrison stepped in, holding a thick folder. Marcus, these are the official statements from the National Business Leaders Summit. Every sponsor, every attendee, every partner has affirmed your status, condemned the abuse, and recognized your contributions. It's all here. Marcus took the folder, leafing through each page carefully. The signatures, the letters, and the official memos told a story of accountability that extended beyond personal vindication. It was institutional recognition of wrongdoing and a pledge to prevent repetition. This is more than I expected, Marcus said softly. It's validation, yes, but it's also responsibility. Responsibility to ensure systemic change. Harrison nodded. And it starts with you, Marcus. You've shown how courage, documentation, and strategic exposure can turn humiliation into empowerment. Dana chimed in, her voice measured but firm. Blake is officially under investigation, Marcus. Internal Affairs is proceeding with documented evidence. Public opinion, legal scrutiny, and professional accountability are converging. This is a turning point for him, and for anyone observing abuse of authority. Marcus glanced at his reflection in the glass window, sunlight cutting across his face. The anger, fear, and humiliation he had felt hours ago were now tempered by clarity and purpose. The humiliation was sharp, he admitted, but it forced me to confront the system, the witnesses, and my own response. I couldn't just react emotionally. I had to act strategically. That's how vindication works. Harrison adjusted his tie, voice quiet but intense. And act you did. The conference hall, the live streams, social media, media coverage, all of it creates a permanent record. Blake's bias, arrogance, and abuse of authority cannot be erased. Marcus nodded. Not erased, but learned from. I hope Blake understands that accountability isn't optional. Exposure, evidence, and public scrutiny are forces that cannot be avoided. They exist to protect the system and ensure that injustice is met with consequences. Dana smiled faintly, eyes scanning the messages on her laptop. The world is watching, Marcus. Every action you took, from composure in the lobby to the keynote speech, is documented. Your vindication is not just personal, it's exemplary. Others will learn from it. Marcus set the folder down, shoulders relaxing slightly. Then let's ensure it reaches them. Let's make sure every business leader, attendee, and observer understands what happened and why accountability matters. Outside, the city buzzed, unaware of the personal and professional storm that had just been weathered. But inside, in that office, Marcus felt the weight of both victory and responsibility. The humiliation of the lobby, the sting of public detainment, and the tension of facing an authority figure like Blake had transformed into a powerful force of moral and social authority. Harrison leaned closer. Marcus, do you want to issue a statement before the press conference? Marcus nodded. Yes, but carefully. It's not about retaliation. It's about principles, accountability, and ensuring systemic awareness. He paused, gathering his thoughts. We need to be precise. Every word must reinforce the narrative. Injustice cannot hide. Exposure empowers witnesses, and authority has limits. Dana typed rapidly, compiling notes, drafting statements, and coordinating messaging with Harrison. Every word, every sentence, every phrasing was deliberate. Strategic exposure amplified by careful articulation. Marcus's experience had taught him that vindication was as much about narrative control as it was about law or public support. At the press conference, reporters crowded into the room, cameras trained, microphones poised. Social media streams broadcasted live, capturing every moment for audiences beyond the walls. Marcus stepped to the podium, shoulders squared, jaw set, eyes scanning the room with quiet authority. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, voice calm but resonant. What happened to me at the National Business Leaders Summit was more than personal humiliation. It was an example of systemic bias and abuse of authority in action. I was detained without cause, publicly humiliated, and targeted because of assumptions tied to my appearance. That is unacceptable. A hush fell over the room. Cameras tilted. Reporters typed rapidly. Social media feeds updated in real time. Every witness, every bystander, every observer now had a clear statement of truth. I am grateful, Marcus continued, for support conference organizers, sponsors, and attendees who recognize the injustice and help validate the truth. And I am grateful for legal advocacy that ensured my rights were protected. But this is not just about one individual's vindication. It is about accountability, transparency, and systemic oversight. Questions from reporters came fast, but Marcus responded methodically, calmly, and confidently. Yes, there will be consequences for those who abuse authority. Yes, public exposure is crucial to ensuring accountability. And yes, this is a reminder that bias, when unchecked, affects not just one person, but an entire community. Visibility matters. Evidence matters. Accountability matters. The room erupted into applause. Reporters exchanged nods, journalists typed furiously, and social media lit up with praise, validation, and shares of Marcus's statements. Every recording, every clip, every post solidified his vindication and ensured Blake's actions could not be hidden. Outside, Dana Caldwell spoke quietly into Marcus's ear. The exposure, the accountability, and your composure have created a permanent record. This is as close to definitive vindication as it gets. Marcus nodded slowly. And yet, there's a weight to it. Humiliation has consequences even after vindication. But at least now the system sees, the public sees, and injustice cannot hide. Harrison approached, placing a hand briefly on Marcus's shoulder. You've done more than reclaim dignity. You've set a precedent. You've shown that when authority oversteps, exposure and accountability are not just options, they're inevitable. Marcus exhaled slowly, letting the truth sink in. The fight isn't over, he admitted softly. But today, we've ensured that consequences are clear, that accountability is visible, and that injustice meets recognition. Blake will face professional and social repercussions. And that's only the beginning, Dana added. And it's systemic, Marcus. People will remember this. Organizations will remember this. The narrative you shape will protect others in the future. That's the enduring power of vindication. Marcus glanced out at the city's skyline again, sunlight glinting off glass towers. Vindication isn't just personal, he said quietly. It's structural. It's public. It's the combination of visibility, documentation, and moral authority. And that's how change begins. In that moment, Marcus Avery felt the weight of both triumph and responsibility. The humiliation he had endured, the bias he had confronted, and the injustice he had exposed had all converged into a single truth. Exposure creates accountability, and accountability delivers vindication. And as the cameras rolled, the press asked questions and the world watched, Marcus Avery's journey from humiliation to vindication became a testament, not just to one man's resilience, but to the power of strategic exposure, moral courage, and systemic accountability in the face of bias.